Hey, this is what's new in Reaper 6.69, and this is a pretty small update, but there's a bunch of nice quality of life improvements that I wouldn't want you to miss. Let's get started. And the first change is for plugins. Hold down Control or Command key during startup to suppress scanning new updated VST plugins. So I just finished installing Soundtoys 5 update, and now when I launch Reaper from my dock, I'm going to hold down the Command key right after I hit that button, or else the folder opens up. And it's going to skip the scanning, and I won't have that long wait of checking iLock and all that stuff. It should just get right into Reaper. And by the way, I have a custom splash screen there. And that startup was much faster than if I just started up normally. So let's quit and start it up normally just for a comparison. So there's that VST scanning. There's 21 new plugins, and that's going to take a minute. It's pretty fast on this system, but not as fast as skipping that startup scan when you just want to get into something and maybe you don't want to use all those new plugins right away. Up next, Loopback device. Allow configuring up to 512 channels of Loopback via rearoute_loopback equals key in reaper.ini. So this isn't actually a new feature. This is a hidden feature that just got a little update. You may have seen this in Kenny's video about recording from one Reaper tab to another. So this is just unlocking 500 channels of audio for that. I think maybe it was limited to 64 channels before, but now 512, you're very unlikely to need anything more than that. But yeah, let's go through the setup for that. So we're going to start off in Reaper. We'll go to the Options menu and go to Show Reaper Resource Path in Explorer/Finder. And this will take you to the Reaper Resources folder, whether you're on Windows or Mac. Once we have this folder open, we should quit Reaper. And now we're looking for reaper.ini, and we're going to open up this in any plain text editor. I use Sublime Text on Mac. This is a huge file with a ton of things here. So we're just going to use the find function, and going to be bracket Reaper. On mine, it's line number 680. We're just going to add in something here, which will be rearoute, REAROUTE underscore loopback equals, and then we can put in any number that we want here, a 2-channel loopback, 4-channel, 16-channel, all the way up to 512. So there's really no practical limit for that. And when we add this, it's going to create a new menu option for the input of any track or the output as if it's a hardware output. So I can't see myself using more than 8. I'll just do 8 here, and then hit Command-S to save. That would be Control-S on Windows. We can close this, and then we can open Reaper again. So Reaper's open, and now we've got, under the input, we have all of these loopback inputs now. So this is like a virtual device. Reaper just creates a virtual sound card. And I should mention that it's not an actual virtual audio device. It's only for within Reaper. It only uses this routing between Reaper tabs, but yeah, I just wanted to check that and make sure that everyone understands that. It's not an actual virtual sound card driver that can link to other devices. It's just for within Reaper between project tabs. So let's say we want to take all the audio from project 1 and feed that into project 2. So let's make up a new project tab. And in here, we're going to right-click and make sure that Run Background Projects is on, so it can record while the first project is playing. So back to the first project, we're going to go to the mixer, and on the master track, I will make a new hardware output to Loopback 1 and 2. And then on tab 2, we're going to take this track, right-click its record arm button, set its input to stereo and loop back 1 and 2. We can record on it. I'm not going to monitor enable it because we're already hearing it from the first tab. And yeah, I'll just go ahead and start recording there. Now back to the first tab. Let's take this, drop that in. Let's add some effects to this. Let's take kilohertz, snap heap, browse some random presets. Sure. We'll just loop this, press play. If we go over to this other project tab, we can see this is processed. I just realized that I had my audio device set wrong, so you guys aren't hearing it. But now that's fixed. Let's hit record. So that's now recording on tab 2. We've got this file in here. We got an effect on it. And let's just loop it, basically. And I'm going to change tone. Let's load in a different preset. Pretty cool. And if we jump over to the second tab, we can see all of those changes are being written in real time. So this could be like a backup recorder sort of thing of a live project. Or this could be for sound design manipulation, where you want to have Reapers transport looping in one project tab and continuously in another. I don't want to spend too much more time on this feature. I think it's pretty cool. This is a hidden feature. I hope you can see kind of the potential of this and how it can be useful. And again, this isn't a new feature, just unlocking kind of the number of channels. So 512 channels can be routed through the loopback and into another project tab as an input. Pretty interesting, lots of potential for use there, and yeah, have fun with that. Media import. Add option to copy media to project directory on paste of items or tracks. Preferences, move import related options from media to media/import. All right, so we are in the Reaper preferences now, and we're going to scroll down to the media tab, and these options have been rearranged a little bit. The new page here is import. So everything related to importing media, like what happens if you drag and drop something, is it going to prompt? Is it going to copy to your project folder? Now there's this new option, also copy media when pasting items into project. So this used to be a pretty big issue where you had multiple projects in tabs and you're copying and pasting between them. And then let's say you delete one of those projects that was open previously that you copied from. Now that media gets deleted as well. And now your main project where you had pasted into it, it's missing media. This has frequently been an issue, and I've seen this come up many times in discussions on Facebook, on the forum, on Slack, on Discord. You used to need to be aware that copying media between project tabs wouldn't copy the source to your project folder. Now you have that option. So if we go to File and Project Settings, where does media go when we copy something? It goes to this path to save media files. I suggest you just type this in as audio files or media, and that will create a folder for every project that copied and pasted, imported media goes to. So there we go, audio files, and now wherever you save this project, so my project / audio files is where all your media will be. Now, there's certain projects where you're going to be copying and pasting media. Maybe it's video files, very large files, and you've already organized them in a certain way on your drive. Maybe you want to keep all your B-roll library in its own folder and not copied for each project. Maybe you have template files that you want to keep in the same spot, so you're not duplicating these files for every single project that you work on. We also have this option on import of media to project, use global preference, copy media to project path. So that's just verifying that that option is there. We can also override the preference for this per project. Again, this is not a new function, just something that I want you to be aware of because it's related to this, and this stuff won't work without it. If you had your project settings set to do not copy, and then you had your preference set to copy, it wouldn't copy. So the project setting overrides the preference. Just be aware of that. So those two new things is this page of the preferences is reorganized, and there's this new option, also copy media when pasting items into projects. Project settings, add configuration for default track channel count and parent send channel count. All right, so once again, file menu, project settings. Then we're gonna go over to advanced, and we have two new options here, default track channels, 2 all the way up to 64 channels per track. So most music projects are going to just default to 2, and you never need to do more than 2 channels. But if you're a sound designer, if you work with surround media, there may be a situation where you want every track to be a 6-channel track or an 8-channel track or a 12-channel track. And you can set that here instead of having to do that individually for every single track in your project. So super nice to have this option. And then we also have the default parent send channels. If it's set to all, it's going to be how Reaper used to work, how you're used to, where if there's a track with 4 channels and it sends to a folder track or it sends to another track, all 4 channels will be sent simultaneously. But we can also make this mono, stereo, 3-channel, all the way up to 64 channels. So all the options are there from all channels to 64 channels and every single channel in between. I think most people are going to want this on all or on stereo. And again, this is a project setting, so this only applies to the current project. You can click this Save as Default Project Setting to apply to new projects. But if you have a default template, which you should if you've been following my videos, you'll also need to set this in your default template to update for next projects. So we're going to come back to this in a minute, actually, because there's another function here. Routing, allow arbitrary channel count for parent send. Let's say we've got 2 tracks in this project. First track will be a folder. And now the second track will have 4 channels, like it's something that has a sidechain. When we have a parent send, which means that it's going to go to the master track or to a folder track, we have the option of sending all channels, mono, stereo, 3-channel, or 4-channel when it's a 4-channel track. If we set this to a 16-channel track, then we have all the options up to 16. So by default, the way this is set is going to send all channels, all 16 channels from this track will go to the parent. But currently, the parent track is only stereo. So it's not set up to receive 16 channels. So we'd need to set this to 16 channels as well in order to use this function. You may notice here that as soon as I set this to 16, this drop-down menu now goes to 1 through 16. Even for me, this is a little confusing, so let's go over this again. Track 2 is sending to track 1 as a folder. If this track has 16 channels and it's sending on all channels, it's going to send channels 1 through 16. That folder track won't get all 16 channels unless you would make it a 16-channel track. If it's only a 2-channel track, it's only going to receive 2 channels. So not all those channels are getting through. Now let's set this again to a 16-channel track on track 1, the folder. And now on track 2, I'm going to say only send stereo, only send 2 channels from the 16-channel track to the parent track. And now I can actually choose which of those channels will be sent. I can send 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4. Maybe I only want to send channels 9 and 10 to this track. And my folder track is going to send all channels to the master track, which is I can see here what the receiving track is. It's a stereo channel. If I go to my master track, here's my routing for the master track. If I set the master track to 16 channels, now on the sending track, I can see that it's 1 through 16. If I change this to a 12-channel track, you can see that updates there. If I change this to 2 channels, you can see that this updates there. So we can choose how many channels are being sent, and we can see what the receiving track channel count is. There we go. It's a little confusing, and this stuff works with these options here. So default track channel count and the default parent send channels. If I set this to 10 channels and 10 channels and OK, and I make a new track, this track starts out with 10, 10, and sending all 10. And just maybe to make it a little more confusing, the receiving track has 16 channels, so that's where we're seeing groups of 10 being sent up to channel 16. So we can kind of offset. They don't have to start on channel 1. Now, the benefit of this for musicians, people mixing, where you're rarely going over 4 channels, this comes into play with sidechain channels. So often a track within a folder is receiving a sidechain signal. If you're set to sending all channels to the folder tracks, to the parents, then that's also sending all those sidechain signals from the individual tracks. That's going through there. So the folder track will be receiving those sidechain signals as well. You may not want that. And in that case, you would set the track to stereo and make sure it's only on channels 1 and 2. So even though this has the most benefit for surround multi-channel workflows, I think this also can impact general mixing where you're using sidechains or you have multi-channel tracks that send into stereo tracks later on. So it's something to be aware of, but don't worry too much about it. Region Marker Manager. Add option to display take markers that are outside the visible part of the media item. So quick recap of item or take markers. So I'm just going to put in a blank item here. And in this point, I'm going to right-click, take markers, and add or edit take marker at cursor. All right, and I'll give this a name, take marker. So there's a take marker. And if I trim this, we don't see the take marker anymore, right? Or let's say we take this, we copy out a section, and now this second item doesn't have a take marker unless we trim it out. Hopefully that makes sense. So items can exist that have take markers within a project, but maybe not every part that that item is being used for will show the take marker. If we go to the View menu and go to the Region Marker Manager, right now, there are 2 items. Technically, both have take markers, but only one is visible. So we only see one here in the take markers list. If I right-click and check this option, Display Take Markers that are outside the visible media item, now we have both. When I have this option, Seek Playback when selecting a marker or region, I can jump to this position. And with this one here, this is the hidden one, it is lined up with that take marker that was invisible. So the old way was to always display the take markers. The new way is to make that optional. We can hide take markers that are not actually visible. But yeah, just check that option if you want to navigate to a take marker that is within an item, but maybe not actually visible. There are 2 new options for the render window. Add option to write outfile.render_stats.html for each rendered file. Support rendering stems pre-fader from render dialog. In the past bunch of updates, there have been these HTML stat pages here, like this. Now that can be saved to a file as you're rendering. Rather than having to save manually. It's just a checkbox down here, save out file render_stats. Yeah, so I'll just save this to the desktop for now, just to see what that looks like. Render one file. I'm going to open the folder, and then we've got, so out file gets renamed to whatever the project name is, or whatever that file name is for the render. And if I open this, it looks like this. So same sort of file that you're used to. But yeah, that's a new function. Saves you a step of having to manually hit save on that as a HTML file. Next, pre-fader stems from render dialog. So the stem render function in Reaper is to make a selection of tracks, let's say tracks 1 and 3. In the source dropdown, we go to selected tracks stems. Down here in the options section, render stems pre-fader. Check that box. And now the volume adjustments do not have an impact on the output of the sound, which is a great option to have. Often when you're preparing to mix, you will render stems or render selected tracks, and you want to do that sometimes with effects, sometimes without, usually without any volume and panning adjustments. Basically, you want the source files with the edits included, maybe with some effects if that's important. But rendering pre-fader will just take away the volume and pan from that situation and render you the file with the effects if you want, but yeah, without the volume adjustments. And of course, if you want to prevent any case of clipping, you're going to want to set your bit depth to 32-bit float. Always a good idea when you're rendering stems, especially when it's going to be pre-fader. So that's it for this one. There's a whole bunch more videos in this series. If you missed any of the Reaper features that have come out since Reaper 5.0, it's usually covered in a video that I've done. So links to the playlist down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.